this should be like headline news. Biden raises taxes on the middle class. This is BetterWealth with Caleb Guilliams. On today's episode, we're going to talk about the new tax on the middle class. You're going to want to watch this and share this if you use Venmo, Cash App, if you use Facebook Marketplace, or anything app-wise as it relates to exchanging money. And we're going to be diving into the 1099K, which was enacted by the American Rescue Plan. And so without further ado, Dan, break this down. And again, talk about why this is, quite frankly, a big attack on the middle class.
Yeah, so the American Rescue Act that passed earlier this year directly affects the 1099K, which a lot of people may not even be familiar with because it hasn't directly affected them until next year. It will. And this comes with third-party payment processors where the threshold is going to be dropped. But the backstory is that the 1099, which people are most familiar with, is like if we do contract work or whatever, it's people just arbitrarily say 1099, but there's multiple 1099s. There was the 1099 MISC, which is now the 1099 NEC, and this is a $600 mark. So if I do contract work for you and it's $500, technically there's no 1099 involved in that because the threshold is $600. Mm-hmm. But now if the contract work was $750, now suddenly I'm going to get a 1099 NEC, which I'm going to report as income. You get the deduction for that. And that's what most people, like if you're driving Uber or doing any sort of contract work, you're familiar with that form of 1099. Now, the 1099K comes into play for payment processors. So like you had mentioned, Facebook Marketplace, Venmo, Cash App, eBay, Shopify, PayPal, Stripe. A lot of people using Stripe, a lot of people having swag shops and all kinds of things. The entrepreneurs out there that have all sorts of payment processors right now. Well, previously and right now, the threshold for that 1099, just like the 600 for the 1099 NEC, for the 1099K currently is $20,000. So what that means is anything sub $20,000, there is no form generated. So if you sold the and asset via Stripe, and you sold $19,000 worth of books this year, they're not going to submit a 1099K.
Okay.
However, if you sold $22,000 of books, you're now going to get a 1099K at the end of the year.
On the full $22,000.
On the full $22,000.
Okay, so there is somewhat of an incentive to keep that under $20,000.
Yeah, so I mean, this can get into, do you report it, do you not report it? It's kind of like tips as a waiter or waitress. Technically, you're supposed to report that. Just like technically, even right now, sub $18,000, you're supposed to report that as non-employee compensation. However, the IRS says it itself. There's things, and it can get way far afield of voluntary versus involuntary.
Right.
But the whole premise here is that right now, if under 20,000, you're not forced. Nobody's gonna twist your arm to do so. However, past that, 22,000, yes, you're gonna get that form. And this is why what you said is so important, is that this is directly affecting the middle class. Right. This is directly affecting all the people that are transacting all the things like I had mentioned previously. We were talking about COVID and people, selling stuff on Facebook Marketplace. If we sold a couch that we have, we'd probably make more than $600, which with the new rule would now become taxable income.
Right. Let me walk through this. So now this is not enacted till the end of the year. So starting in 2022, this is when it's going to go into effect. I could sell a couch. I could I could pay for dinner and everyone could pay me back on Venmo and all this stuff. And I think I made $1,000 or something on Venmo. I'm good. I'm like way under the $20,000 mark. Mm-hmm. Starting next year, if I go over $600 through the whole year, you're paying me, my sister's paying me, all these people are paying me. It goes over 600. Venmo is going to send me a 1099K, and I'm going to have to report that as income.
That's correct.
So, I mean, in a way, everyone's an entrepreneur now, right?
That's right.
The U.S. government is making everyone entrepreneurs, and as a result, making you pay tax on that. What's really interesting, and when you broke this down for me, number one, I was like, why isn't everyone talking about this? Like, you were the first person to share this with me, and I'm like, this should be like headline news. Biden raises taxes on the middle class. I just think it's an interesting thought experiment. My question is, do you agree with this or not? Because, I mean, obviously, our government country are in massive debt. So it could be a creative way to raise money. But I feel like it's attacking it's not going to really affect the top earners.
No, not at all. Because if you're making more than 20,000 on any one of these platforms, you're already getting the form. You're already reporting that as income.
Yep.
And again, it's like the American Rescue Act. We're going to save America, and yet we're doing exactly what we said we're not doing. All the rhetoric of tax the rich right now, and here we are with something that's touted as being the rescue plan, and yet it's going to be a carte blanche, like grab a wider net of tax revenue on the middle and lower classes.
Right. And what's interesting is the government will use things like they won't attack the tax rate. It's very political to raise taxes, but they do it all the time by things like lowering the threshold.
Yep.
So, or like you could do this on income tax. So back in history, maybe the tax didn't change, but you could, to be in the top tax bracket, they lowered the threshold. They just raised taxes on you, but they didn't do it. And no one really understood that. And so they didn't really complain about it. That's the same thing. They're going to bring in more tax. They're essentially taxing us more, but they're not raising taxes. They're slipping it in. So it's really interesting. I'm wondering what this is going to do, how much money they're going to raise. I'm just wondering how many people are going to be surprised after the end of next year when they get a new tax. Is it 1099K?
Yep.
And so that's going to be very, very interesting. Let us know in the comments what your thoughts are. Do you agree, disagree? What are your thoughts on this? Do you think this is fair? We want to hear from you. And if you know of other people that use Venmo, I know I personally am going to share this to like all my friends that use these apps because like me, they probably don't have a clue that this exists. Thank you so much for listening to the BetterWealth podcast. It would mean the world to me if you could hit subscribe, leave a review, and share this with the people that you know and love.